Hi, welcome to this webinar on the Master of International Relations at Macquarie University. I need to begin by offering an apology that my colleague Glenn Kefford has been unable to make it this evening. Glenn was going to be talking about the degree focusing on politics and public policy. So anyone who's here just for that degree, unfortunately, I won't be speaking about it, but you can still log your questions at the end of the session, and either the team with me here will get back to you right away, or if we need to send them to the public policy staff, then we'll get the public policy staff to speak to you shortly. Okay, so I'm here to talk about the Master of International Relations at Macquarie. And what I'm going to do in this short session is just basically get the technology working. There we go. I'm going to run through some of what you study in the degree. We'll look at the actual structure if you join us at Macquarie, the specific kinds of units that you might be studying and what content there is in them, and talk about some of the likely outcomes, the career opportunities that come with studying international relations. So first, what sort of content will you look at in the degree? It's certainly a busy time right now to be studying international relations. My own specialisation, one of them is in climate politics, and just a few days ago, President Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Agreement. And students of international relations look at this perhaps in a slightly different way from people considering just its impact on domestic politics. They'll look at, so when studying the Paris Agreement and negotiations on climate change, you'll place that in the context, first of all, on the specific institutions, the specific treaties and agreements and the obligations that they have for different states. So in this case, we're looking at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the various agreements that have been negotiated beneath that, one of which is the Paris Agreement. And then you look at the kind, or we look at, when studying this topic, at the kinds of obligations that states have. One of the really interesting things about Trump's withdrawal from Paris is that the Paris Agreement had very limited binding obligations for states. States need to put forward what are called NDCs, which are basically national abatement plan, or national plans to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and they make promises to assist, as in rich countries make promises to assist poorer countries with their adaptation and mitigation expenses. But there are very few binding obligations in the agreement. And this has led some people to suspect that Trump is predominantly motivated by domestic politics in this move, as in there's very little practical impact for the United States in withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. But we'd also look at the interaction between other concerns that countries have, issues around energy security. An IR theorist will look at climate politics in the context of all of the things that states worry about. And in general, some IR theorists, particularly those who take a realist perspective, would say that China and the United States are going to be more concerned about their relative strength, their security relationship, than they are about climate change. So some scholars won't be surprised that the US climate policy is motivated more by domestic politics than it is by international politics. Obviously, though, there'll be a significant reputational concern for the United States in having made this move. So, looking at what we study more generally, the discipline of international relations often traces its story back to the post-World War I years, when the first chair of international relations was founded at the University of Aberystwyth. And that chair there was a donation given to the University of Aberystwyth with the specific purpose of studying the causes of war and how wars can be avoided. So reflecting on war and peace, how you know why wars occur, how they can be avoided, continues to be one of the central concerns of the discipline of international relations. However, those of us studying international relations now look at a much wider range of topics. So I've got a little list there of things that are fairly core to the Master of International Relations at Macquarie. Obviously, for many decades now, terrorism has had a growing profile in international politics. Global poverty and questions of development, uneven development, and global inequality, we certainly focus on in many units. I've spoken a little bit already about climate politics. A couple of decades ago, if you were studying international relations, there would have been very little focus on environmental politics. But now, no matter whether you're studying security, international political economy, international relations theory, questions of, I guess, environmental politics, green theory, are more prominent in the discipline. Although I don't have feminist theories or theories of post-colonialism on this specific list here, these are also approaches to international relations that are much more prominent today than they were just a few decades ago. There's an entire unit that is a core unit in the degree that focuses on basically questions of global governance and international law. So that takes a really detailed look at, it's not a black letter law subject, but it looks at the politics of international law, ranging from studying the foundation and subsequent history of the International Criminal Court to the legality of various international humanitarian interventions and military actions such as current action in Syria, the United States invasion of Iraq, etc. Globalization, also on this list, is a theme that we cover across a wide variety of units in the Master of International Relations. And finally, human rights. There's an elective on the politics of international human rights, but also this topic comes up in many other contexts. We'll look in the unit also, it's not in the unit, in the degree also, at the relations between major actors in the international system. These include, traditionally the state has been at the focus of the study of international relations, and many theorists of international relations still presume that the state is the central actor. However, there's no question that multinational corporations, non-governmental organisations, and international organisations also play crucial roles in many particular questions. When you're looking at questions of security, you might argue, sure, the state is still central. But if you're interested in questions of change in the international system, how does a new issue get put on the international agenda? So I mentioned a minute ago the foundation of the International Criminal Court, and there's no question that it was a coalition of NGOs working frequently with middle power states that really drove the negotiation of and the creation of the International Criminal Court. So there's a fairly powerful example of how NGOs and middle powers can drive change in international politics. But there's a very wide variety of issues, including climate change, which I've previously discussed, including raising the prominence of various questions such as gender equality and human rights, where non-governmental organisations frequently set the international agenda. So we look at international politics from a variety of perspectives, thinking about the institutions, thinking about legal frameworks and the relevance of those legal frameworks, thinking about culture, how that influences state and other actors' behaviour, economic motivations, and the word normative there refers to theories of international relations or approaches to international relations that are interested not only in describing the world, but also in explaining how we should act, how we might transform the world, how we might seek ways to make change for the better. So there are opportunities across the unit to engage with these normative questions, as well as trying to describe and better understand how international politics operates. And of course, there are a number of units and sections, in particular units, that focus on the world's regions. Yeah, I won't run through them right now, but you can see a list right there of some of the regions that we focus on. So people often ask what career options come from studying international relations. And international relations is not, so there are some degrees like being a physiotherapist. You study physiotherapy, and at the end of it, you're qualified to be a physiotherapist and related tasks, and it's, there's a fairly clear conveyor belt from study to job. The kind of work that graduates of international relations do is much more diverse. I've got a list here. Obviously, many people study international relations and go on to careers in public service. Some in foreign affairs, defence, development, trade, intelligence agencies, these areas that have historically been really focused on international politics. But across all areas of not just public service, but basically of public life, of corporate life, there is an increasing internationalisation of just the way things that are organised, which means that having a good understanding of international politics is increasingly useful across a very wide variety of jobs. Some people go on to work in international organisations, the United Nations, various regional organisations, various specific bodies, whether it's the World Trade Organization or International Monetary Fund. There's a wide variety of international organisations that students sometimes go on to work in. Trade promotion organisations are quite a common area for students of international relations to find themselves in. Many of our students already have backgrounds working for non-governmental organisations. I've listed the Red Cross, Amnesty, Oxfam, etc. there, but many of our students go on to work for that kind of organisation. Multinational corporations, political risk consulting, journalism and communications are other roles that increasingly require a level of international expertise. So moving on to looking at what you study specifically, the specific units that you'll look at. So our Master of International Relations is generally a 1.5 year qualification. If you have previous studies or relevant work experience, then it's sometimes possible to have recognition of prior learning, which means that you can bring the degree down either by a number of units or in some cases by 6 months to complete it in 1 year. Many of our students take double degrees at the moment we have double degrees with a Master of International Business, a Master of International Communication, and a Master of Translation and Interpreting, along with the Master of International Relations. Each of these double degrees is a 2.5 year degree, and once again it's sometimes possible to bring that down to 2 years. So I'm now going to speak about the core requirements of the Master of International Relations, and these are also the core requirements of the International Relations component of those double degrees. So all our students complete 6 core units. They look at theories of international relations and international relations as an academic discipline. Theories are really at the centre of that discipline, and that's probably because if you think of the totality of world politics, it's so complex, so diverse, that it's almost impossible for us to comprehend that without the guide of some kind of theory to simplify it, to offer us a lens through which to look at the world. So the unit titled Theories of International Relations takes it to a more or less, it looks at the historical origins of contemporary theories, but it focuses on the history of theories of international, or the development of theories since, not specifically, but predominantly since World War II, and introduces the major frameworks and sets of ideas through which we study world politics. Another core unit, international law and institutions, looks much more carefully at what institutions exist, what they do, and what the formal legal rules shaping state behavior, or attempt to shape state behavior, are, and how those rules are created, where they come from, what's the politics behind those rules. Of course, we'll see in many cases that states ignore, or powerful states ignore those rules. When the United States invaded Iraq, the vast majority of international lawyers would say that there was no foundation for that in international law, and yet international law was powerless to constrain a great power such as the United States. And so realist theorists of international relations would look at that, and they'd say that it shows that international law is, the word they tend to use is, epiphenomenal, that it's only going to be honoured, according to some scholars, if, or it's only going to be followed if it reflects the interests of great powers, and where it conflicts with the interests of those of great powers, they may be free to violate it. Now, there are many other approaches that would question that and would say no. Most of the time, most states obey most international law, and therefore it's important to study it and understand it, and also to reflect on when rates of compliance are higher or lower. Now, the way I've organised the core units here, I've organised it by semester. So we typically offer those 2 units in semester, along with a unit on research methods in politics and international relations, which introduces you to the major methods through which we study international politics. I'll just say, although we touch upon some quantitative methods, there's not certainly don't need to have any high-level statistical skills in order to take that unit, research methods in politics and international relations. It's predominantly looking at the non-statistical research methods. Then I'll come back to that other unit in the middle of the screen in a moment. And in semester 2 of most years, we offer 2 units. One is international security, which is taught by Lavina Lee, and the other international political economy, taught by Sung-Young Kim. When I say it's taught by these 2, it does change from year to year, but this year those are the 2 staff that are teaching these 2 units. The international security focuses not just on, certainly introduces traditional questions of security, of geopolitics, etc., but it also looks at non-traditional security. There's been a move recently to reconceptualize, when I say there's been a move that some people have promoted to reconceptualize security. One of the ways in which people do that is to think of human security, whereas security scholars have traditionally thought predominantly about the security of the state. Scholars looking at human security say, hang on, most of the threats to individual people don't come from interstate conflict. They come from all kinds of other areas, whether it's internal conflict or even whether it's security threats such as domestic violence. That security needs to be reconceptualized, and we need, well, according to these scholars, it would be desirable to look at, to make the human, the individual person, the referent object of security studies rather than just the state. International political economy looks at how economic factors intersect with international politics. Sung-Young Kim's own research focuses on the developmental state, and in particular on the greening of Korea's economy, looking at the way in which green growth has been a developmental strategy for some states recently. And so the final core unit is a practice unit which students generally complete at the end of their degree, which has it, the unit changes a bit over time, but it frequently involves the possibility to um, develop a more independent research project. There are a number of other units which also allow you to develop a independent research project. This includes a minor thesis unit, and also there's an internship unit which is quite popular, where students can be placed with a variety of sometimes not-for-profit, sometimes corporate organisations, and they complete a project which they design in negotiation with the host organisation. I have there on the screen a list of the other electives that are commonly offered. We certainly don't offer every elective every semester. Generally, we offer each of those electives on a 2-year kind of cycle. That's just showing you the list of electives that we have at the moment. It's certainly possible that they might change. And so you can see the diversity of them, ranging from the politics of international human rights law to units focusing on Europe, on the Asia Pacific region. Sorry, there is. Sorry, I thought I'd left one off. The international relations of the Middle East. So you can see regional politics coming in with those units, and also one on East Asia and the Pacific. Then there's also, as I've mentioned, an internship unit, a unit focusing on the international system, on war and violence in world politics. So there's quite a wide diversity of kind of specializations that you can involve in. In the 1.5-year degree, students also select a number of elective units from other departments, sometimes even other faculties in the university. Typically, they come from sometimes public policy, law, international communication, human geography, security studies, and anthropology. So there's really quite a wide diversity of electives that you're able to take as part of the degree program. And of course, you can find all of this on the handbook on the university website. So to summarise, the academics who will teach you in the Master of International Relations have a very wide variety of research interests, focusing from India's foreign policy to energy policy in the European Union, to scholars focusing on human rights, Middle Eastern politics and political theory. So no matter what your interest, you'll probably find someone within the department who's able to kind of nurture and guide you in that particular interest. We have a variety of double degrees listed there, with international business, translating and interpreting, and international communication. There is an internship unit, which is quite popular. I've written high-performing students there because there can be a kind of a hurdle of reaching a certain level of performance to be able to participate in the internship unit. The program also develops your research skills and gives you the capacity to develop an independent research project. If you wish to, you can transition from the degree into a Master of Research, which adds another year to your studies. The degree develops skills in critical thinking, problem solving, research writing, and oral communication. Generally, the classes are quite small. Generally, it's a very diverse student group, composed both of local students and of a good number of international students from pretty much across the world, and that can make for some really fascinating classroom discussions because of the different perspectives, the different cultural backgrounds and understandings of world politics that people bring to the classroom that they get to explore. All of the lectures are recorded. There are online discussion boards, a variety of online resources, which gives you some flexibility in the way in which you manage your studies. Okay, so I've probably spoken a little bit too long. I should turn over to questions now.